Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 2025 film Fear Street Prom Queen, and this is directed by Matt Palmer and stars India Fowler, Susanna Strawn and Fina Straza. With prom night coming up, a killer has decided to start carving up the prom queen candidates one by one. Well, I didn't mind the original Fear Street trilogy. They kind of came out of nowhere, released on Netflix, one after the other, within a week sort of time period there. So within the 3-week period, we had the entire trilogy. And one of them was actually set in the 70s, one was set in the 90s, and one was actually set in the 1600s, which gave them all this unique flavour. But they all came together to make this kind of one story that had been happening over centuries, really. And I thought it was a cool little idea. I didn't love the movies or anything. They were fine. However, I was very surprised at the time with those time periods that they picked that none of them were actually set in the 80s, despite them, most of them, I think 2 out of 3 of them were mainly slasher films, and that is where mainly slashers, the subgenre, took off now. And everything around them was kind of set on the 80s as well. We had Stranger Things, you know, it's still going, but I think Stranger Things had just released that year on Netflix and everything. Everything was doing throwbacks to the 80s, so it was kind of fresh to have one in the 90s there. But we didn't get an 80s one. But this one, Fear Street Prom Queen, is actually set in the 80s. And I was very intrigued to check this one out when Netflix decided that they were going to do another Fear Street film, but it wasn't going to be a trilogy, just a standalone movie. And this certainly feels like Carrie and Prom Night being moulded together there to make this really fun, cheesy 80s slasher movie, even though it's set in 2025. But we got this main protagonist, Laurie, who is kind of an outcast. You know, she's bullied a lot by the more popular girls at school, and she kind of keeps herself to herself, and it gave off that very Carrie personality. But she's actually going for prom queen here, and she's kind of like the underdog, the dark horse, going up against these very popular girls. But also we've got a slasher killer in the background there, just taking people out left, right and centre, and that's where the kind of inspiration from Prom Night comes, because this is all set, of course, on prom night. So it doesn't take a brain surgeon to see that these are the 2 biggest inspirations for this film, but it works. This movie really does feel like it transports you to the 80s itself. I know this has been done countless times, but I think Fear Street Prom Queen really does pull it off very well indeed, with the colour, the whole 80s aesthetic visual look that we've got here, the stereotypical 80s characters, and the absolute banging soundtrack just makes this year of 1988 seem absolutely wonderful there. And I was also born in that year, so that's another reason it's wonderful. But seriously, this soundtrack is absolutely amazing. It's just banger after banger that just really give off that total 80s vibe right there. And I think 80s slasher fans mainly are going to be right at home here, because we don't just have that whole 80s feel. There's some really cool kills to go along with that, and that's what slasher fans come here for. I mean, there's some real brutality here. We got people's hands being chopped off, decapitations, but just really impactful kills with different types of sharp instruments. I mean, you kind of feel the pain as these weapons, I suppose, penetrate their victims. I mean, it just really does go for that hit hard feel. And they're not the most creative kills or anything, but I still enjoyed most of them here. In fact, nearly all of them. Now, I really liked our protagonist, Laurie, here. She's up against some really mean girls going for prom queen here, but she's kind of doing it for herself. She feels like she needs to do it, especially because this family tragedy has happened in the background there. And she feels like she wants to just sort of leave that in the past and, you know, become something a little bit there. But these girls are really nasty to her, corner her at times, you know, really do mock her. And I kind of wanted her to fight back a lot of the time. I think she lets these girls walk all over it a little bit too much. But I think the movie is trying to do that, so it makes you get on Laurie's side even more. And you don't feel bad whatsoever when the killer who is going around is just chopping these girls up into bits. And I actually wanted the killer to take these out in the worst ways possible, because they really do cross the line, especially when they're mocking Laurie over the past family tragedy that she's had. I mean, it's totally out of order. So yeah, you're right behind Laurie all the way there to grab this tiara and become prom queen. But the whole bunch of characters here, the cast, I mean, they're fun enough. I mean, no one really stands out, but you've got, you know, the goth chick who's Laurie's best friend and is into the horror movies. So I kind of liked her a lot because she was always talking about The Lost Boys and she had a zombie Holocaust poster in her bedroom. So yeah, I could relate to her a little bit because I love horror myself, of course. We also get stoners, jocks, nerdy teachers, nerds themselves, you know, and the bunch of girls I talked about who rule the school, basically. So everyone brings something personality-wise. And there's some silly dialogue here at times to bring a more comedic approach to the movie. I wouldn't say it's overly comedic, but I found myself laughing out loud a few times because when the jokes land, they land. And it just sort of gives off a bit of light entertainment, I suppose. In these movies, you kind of got to have that light comedic relief. And yeah, I was down for it. I don't like too much comedy in my horror movies unless I know it's a full-blown comedy horror. But it really got the balance right here. And there was one recurring joke that kept happening in this movie where this DJ was so excited to be playing all his favourite songs and getting requests off people before the prom. And this jock just walks up to him and goes, "That's the playlist. That's what you play. You don't dare change it. I'm going to beat the shit out of you." As the movie goes on, people are coming up to this DJ requesting songs, and he has a little look around to see if this jock's there, and he goes, "Okay, I might be able to play you it in a minute," or any other time that he wants to play a different song, this jock will just appear out of nowhere and warn him and say, "Don't you dare change that song or I'm going to beat the shit out of you." But it happens like 3 or 4 times out the movie where this jock just appears out of nowhere if this DJ dares to even think about changing the song. So that was a fun joke, and even though it happened 3 or 4 times in the movie, it got me every time. I thought it was hilarious. Now, I just want to say a couple of things I'm mixed on here. One of them is the reveal of the killer in this movie. I guessed it, and I hate it when that happens because I don't feel like the movie has done a really good job of masking, excuse the pun, that killer very well for the audience. Maybe it's just me watching so many of the slasher films and, you know, whodunit movies that I can kind of see where the director's going at times. However, it kind of excelled a little bit after that. And I thought it was pretty clever what happened there. So overall, by the end of it, I actually liked the reveal. It just, at first, I wasn't quite sure on it. Now, I'm also mixed on the practical / CGI effects that we have here. I've mentioned this in reviews before, but I feel like a lot of directors are going to be doing this going forward in future, and this movie does it. There are practical effects mixed with CGI and CGI blood here. And I feel like the director is trying to please both crowds. You got the hardcore gorehounds who grew up on practical effects, like myself, and then there are the modern generation who I don't know if they really care too much, and that's just what they're used to. But I feel like directors are putting practical effects in there and also doing the easy bit where they don't have to do too much practical effects to maybe save on budget constraints or whatever, or maybe it's just they're not the greatest at practical effects. I mean, it doesn't cost that much. Damien Leone will tell you that. So, look, I feel like they're doing it so people won't be too critical. They're doing a bit of both. And people like me can kind of look past it a little bit when it's done well. And I think it was fine here. I still enjoyed all of the kills, even though it popped in here and there. Now, I wasn't too sure on the whole mum story background of Laurie's mum here, where this family tragedy struck. I mean, we kind of get it mentioned at the start of the movie a few times, and then there's just this big exposition dump in the middle of the film where a character explains what happened with Laurie's mum, and she's been accused of killing Laurie's father, I think it was. And it just never really felt interesting to me. I think if the mum character was in this movie a lot more and was sort of interacting with Laurie and stuff, it may have had more of an appeal, if you like, but it just feels like a little bit of an afterthought and something we have to throw in there to give here a backstory. I think if they expanded on it a little bit more, mightn't have been too hard on it, but this was a bit of a negative to me, in all honesty. It's also a bit of a romance angle here involving Laurie and one of the candidates for prom queen's boyfriend, this jock dude, and I just weren't feeling that chemistry whatsoever. I mean, I get why the movie done it for a minor thing to take the story forward, but I also feel like we could have found another way, and it wasn't all that needed, all that much. It was the most uninteresting thing about Fear Street Prom Queen for me. I just didn't care every time these little scenes were happening, and yeah, unfortunately, it just wasn't happening with them two characters for me. And I gotta say, even though this is called Fear Street Prom Queen, it doesn't feel like a Fear Street movie. Now, of course, the movie is set in Shadyside, and there's a post-credit scene which kind of links it to the Fear Street films. But apart from that, you wouldn't know it was in the same universe. I mean, the original Fear Street trilogy had a supernatural edge to them, even though they were slasher films. But this one, it's kind of just a standalone slasher with the Fear Street in the title. The Fear Street name in the title, basically. And yeah, I feel like Netflix kind of just called it that because maybe it was popular and they just said, oh, there's another Fear Street movie coming. People will watch it, like me, of course. I don't know. It just didn't feel like the lore or anything was in this film. It just feels detached from that original Fear Street trilogy. But I'm not complaining too much. I liked the original Fear Street trilogy, but I didn't love it. You know, I much prefer this approach than the whole supernatural side of things. However, guys, this was a very fun, simple, and entertaining slasher film that is a love letter to slasher fans in general, but especially slasher fans of the 80s. It doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but it's a slasher film done to a high standard. I'm just going to go ahead and rate this movie now. I'm going to give Fear Street Prom Queen a 7.5 out of 10. Such a good time, and honestly, probably the best Fear Street movie for me, to be honest. Okay, guys, at the end of these reviews, I always like to leave a little fun fact. Now, a fun fact for Fear Street Prom Queen is that a certain character in this movie is smoking in the bathroom, and there's some graffiti on the wall that says, Sarah Fear lives. And she is the original witch from the third Fear Street film that put a curse on Shadyside. Okay, it does link into the original Fear Street trilogy with that bit as well, I suppose. Okay, guys, hope you all enjoyed this review. What do you think of Fear Street Prom Queen or any of the Fear Street films? Please do let me know down below. If you want more 2025 horror movie reviews, I can't even speak today, more 2025 horror movie reviews, they'll be in the link down below. So please do give this video a like and subscribe if horror is your sort of thing. And thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you all on the next video.